What if you were stranded on another planet with no means of communication and no hope of rescue, and all you had to survive was your wits and a potato? Welcome back, friends. This is Book Love. I'm Ember. I'm going to be doing a review of Andy Weir's book, The Martian, today. So, I actually picked this book up at a thrift store near me. Maybe you can see the tag, $1. Pretty awesome. So, I didn't notice my specific copy until after I had bought it. And I actually was trying to find a book for my son to read, and I was like, hey, you like astronauts kind of stuff? I think you'd like this book. It sounds really cool. So I handed it to him. He started reading it. And I'm going to show you. Inside our copy, someone decided to censor our copy. Whoever had this before. I didn't realize that this book had that kind of censoring graffiti in it. I probably wouldn't have bought this copy of the book if I had known that. But it actually turned out okay. At first, my son was like, Mom, what's going on with this? And I said, well, have you ever read a book that has like government secret kind of redacted information? Sometimes I've seen books with document pages where it has stuff blacked out, but it's part of the secret information that you can't see because you're not, whatever, clearanced. So I thought that that's what was going on at first. But it's throughout the entire book, our copy that we got at the thrift store. So I told my son just to plug in the most appropriate seeming word into those spaces, and I think he did really good with it. So that's just kind of a funny thing about this specific book that we have. Overall, this story is fantastic. I didn't really know a lot about it. I know that there's a movie out right now. It's been out for a little while. I haven't seen it. But I thought it sounded very interesting, and I decided to pick it up at the thrift store and give it a try. I actually really have loved this book. It's very engaging. I'll talk a little bit more about Andy Weir in a minute, but I'm just going to kind of summarize the book for you. This is a science fiction book. The main character, his name is Mark. He is on a mission to Mars. I believe, if I remember right, it's the second mission of men on Mars, and he has a team of, I believe there were 6 people total in his on his team. And pretty soon after they get to Mars, there is a crazy dust storm that forces them to evacuate and actually leave Mars and go back to Earth. However, Mark does not get on that shuttle. An accident befalls him, and all of his friends, his astronaut friends, think he's dead. So he has no way to communicate, and the only way to survive, as I mentioned in the intro, is with potatoes. So this book is really amazing as far as it's very scientific. There's a lot of technical information, and Andy Weir, the author, he totes himself as a kind of a super nerd, and he really wanted to get the details and the technical information right in this book, and he worked very hard to do so. Even having all of that like science stuff, and I'm not like a huge science, I'm not hugely knowledgeable in science. I actually really enjoyed this book still. It didn't feel bogged down with science facts. It was still very engaging. The way that he describes everything that's going on, he makes it very accessible, I think, to most people, even my 11-year-old son. He didn't talk about being confused or being like, this doesn't make sense, or any of that stuff. So, excellent way of going about this book and making sure that those details of the science are there, but that as a reader, if you're not a science person, you could still very, very much enjoy this book. And the other awesome part, one of the best parts of this book, is the main character, Mark. So this is very similar to a kind of Robinson Crusoe if there wasn't any plants or air to breathe or animals. I mean, literally, Mark is on his own on a desert, basically desert planet, no water, no vegetation, just red sand everywhere, and just his smarts. He is very intelligent. I love how in here he describes himself. Well, he says that, you know, everyone on the mission had 2 jobs before everyone else left. He says, I'm a botanist and a mechanical engineer, basically the mission's fix-it man who played with plants. And then he says, the mechanical engineering might save my life if something breaks. So Mark has to use his kind of botanist experience and his mechanical engineering and just his general smarts to survive. And it's very, very interesting to see how he does it. Most of this book is written in almost like a journal or kind of a journal format. Each day or each few days, whatever, he's kind of making an entry and talking to himself, but to us. And the other great thing that makes Mark so enjoyable to follow during his journey and everything that goes on is he has an amazing sense of humor. It's very funny, very sarcastic. He definitely has some struggling times in this book, but just the way that he like pushes through and gets over them and just talks, like makes light of his situation as much as you can to stay alive. Very, very enjoyable and a great character. I'm able to identify with Mark even though I'm not like a brainiac like him. So I definitely highly recommend this book to anybody who kind of enjoys those kind of Robinson Crusoe-y survivor stories, and also who just is looking for something really fun and very gripping. It was definitely a page turner for me, and I've read it, I think, in just a few days. So now I want to talk about the author a little bit, Andy Weir, as far as like how this book came about. Now, my copy here, but hopefully most every published copy, in the back has a little section, and I hope that when you get a book, you read even the back stuff after the story, because you find some really cool stuff out. But anyway, it has a reader's guide, and he kind of talks about how this book came into being. And it's really, really humorous. If you read this, Andy Weir just talking about his life and growing up. He says he, as I mentioned earlier, is a super nerd. Let me see if I can find it. I should have marked it, but... So there is the reader's guide in my copy, as well as a little section called A Conversation with Andy Weir. And lastly, this includes an essay by Andy Weir. The essay was originally published on Salon.com. That's SALON.com. I'll put that in the description box below. But definitely read that, okay, you guys, for reals. Like, it helps you really appreciate this book even more. So Andy Weir just loves like space exploration. He says in here some of his just hobbies are creating in his mind like fictitious manned or unmanned trips to Mars or into space, and he created his own program to help calculate information in this book. Originally he was imagining this manned space mission to Mars, and then he thought, how much challenges can I put this main character through and still have him overcome and get through these challenges. And Andy Weir published 1 chapter at a time on his website, and he had several friends or followers who would read those every single time he would put that up. And eventually he got done with the book, as you know, he went chapter from chapter on his website, and he got it all completely done. And his followers wanted him to put it on Amazon so that they could just buy the whole copy and then download it onto their e-readers. So he decided to do that. He went ahead and formatted it and put it up on there for 99 cents on Amazon because he couldn't make it free forever. So he said that he was very surprised that very quickly that was one of the top selling science fiction books on Amazon. So it was pretty amazing how it went from just doing it for fun, putting a chapter on my website here and there, to being on the #1 bestsellers list. So this book has won the Goodreads Choice Awards for Best Science Fiction. It has also won the Audie Award for Science Fiction. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is a movie adaptation out starring Matt Damon. I have not personally watched it yet, but I did really enjoy this book. If I read the book first and then I watch the movie, sometimes it makes me really not like the movie, but I am interested in trying it to see to see if it's enjoyable. I definitely enjoyed this book, and as I mentioned earlier, I recommend it basically to anyone who likes adventures and also who just loves books with a lot of humor. As far as things I didn't like about this book, I can't really think of any. I mean, I just thought it was a wonderful read all the way through. I really love the characters and the character, and just the writing style was very enjoyable for me. So that's it for my review of The Martian. If you've read this book, please leave a comment down below and tell me your thoughts of it. If you haven't read it and you have any questions, I would love to answer them for you or talk about this more in detail. I try not to give too many spoilers, as we know, I don't want to give all the points away of the book. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for being here.